Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. Well, on this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Pauline Jaffe. Pauline is a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2027, and she also applied to Darden through our Future Year Scholars Program, our deferred enrollment program for college seniors, as well as master's students without any prior work experience. In this conversation, I talk with Pauline about her background, her decision to pursue an MBA, what led her to Darden, what attracted her to the Future Year Scholars Program, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Pauline Jaffe. Pauline, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to talk with you. How are you doing? How's everything?
I'm good. We're just finishing up Q4 here. It's been, in some ways, a really short year and in some ways a really long year. Happy to be entering my last week and excited for the summer ahead.
Yeah, how does it feel to be effectively halfway done with your MBA program?
It's a little strange. It's a little surreal, I guess, is the better word. It seems like we've gone through so much, core classes, starting electives, recruiting, all of the above. And so, like I said earlier, in some ways it feels so short, like I just arrived here yesterday in August, but that's not yesterday. And in some ways it also feels really long, just all the things that, we've had to do and the things that we've learned. And I don't know, it's been great, but you just kind of look back and you're like, oh, wow, we've really gone through a lot of things in the first year, and happy to be going on to the summer and, kind of see where that takes me.
Yeah, it's interesting. You applied to Darden through the Future Year Scholars Pipeline and Deferred Enrollment channel. And I have to think when you apply to Darden through that channel, and you obviously have 2 to 5 years to matriculate at Darden, you've been thinking about Darden for a long time. And then now you're here, right? So it's maybe it's similar to other folks, but I think for our Future Year Scholars, maybe a little bit of a unique path.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because, it's funny when I talk to prospective students and they're like, why did you choose Darden? I'm like, well, we have to rewind kind of 5+ years ago. And you prepare to come to business school for, 2 to 5 years. For me, it was 4 years. I had applied just kind of at the tail end of COVID. I got in back in 2021 and then deferred for 4 years. So much has happened in like the world in that time frame. And so, when you're working, you kind of forget about, oh, I'm going to business school. And then all of a sudden it sneaks up on you and you're like, wow, I'm actually going to business school this year. I don't just say that and it's somewhere in the future. And so it was a really long time coming. I think in some ways that meant I was really planned and like I knew where I wanted to live and I knew when all the happenings were, but I was also just generally unprepared to uproot my life and move to Virginia also. So, it's interesting. You think because you have 4 years, you're going to be very well adjusted. And then, there's still the shock of moving and starting class and all of that. So I'm sure it's in some ways the same and in some ways different from students who apply through the kind of normal channels.
Yeah, I'm curious, what attracted you to the Future Year Scholars Program?
Well, I went to a liberal arts school undergrad, and in the back of my head, both of my parents were like, you're going to probably have to do something in addition. And so to be quite honest, when I first applied, it was a lot of my parents and, just this like, okay, well, that's the next step. Like you went to college, you're going to work, and then you're going to go get an MBA. And that was kind of an impetus for a while. And then, you go to work and a lot of the things that you hear people say, whether it's your parents or your mentors or things like that, they start to come to fruition. Just, either there's a lot of red tape or there's, you work in a really big organization and you're responsible for one very particular thing. And so I started to realize that in order to move up to the next level and to have more responsibility and do the kinds of things that I wanted to do, an MBA was going to be really impactful for that and just kind of propel my career forward in a way that, just staying in the work world wasn't. And I also realized that a lot of my bosses were talking about things that I didn't really fully understand. And there was this language around management and running the business that I had no prior experience with because I went to a school that didn't even have a business major or minor certificate, right? The closest thing we had was econ, which is not the same. And so, you start to realize like, okay, these things are actually going to be useful. And for Darden specifically, I don't know, it's actually this very great coincidence. I feel like coincidence is not even the right word, but I went to a Forte conference when I was in college for women who were interested in business. And it must have been one of the first years of the Future Years Scholar Program. They had an admissions person at one of the tables. And I was a sophomore in college, like, this doesn't apply to me. But it was the first business school that I had really interacted with. And so then I went through the process my senior year of college, applying to these different places and kind of vetting them out. And the one that just kept resonating with me was Darden. And so it's kind of this fortuitous loop of they were the first one that I interacted with, and they ended up being the best one that I interacted with and wanted to come here and be part of the community. So yeah.
What is it about the experience that really resonated with you or kept resonating with you?
I just felt like the people here, and this might sound terrible, but they were just like the most normal. You talk to people who either are thinking about business school, and it just is this sense of very sharp elbows in almost every room that you're in. And I really liked that the Darden people were very genuine, willing to help, kind of put themselves out there to talk to admitted students, to talk to prospective students. And you just felt a part of the community from the very beginning. I had deferred for 4 years, and I got emails all the time and got to come to different like happy hours, coffee chats, different webinars for things to kind of keep you interested and engaged in the community for 4 years. And I started to realize that in the application process that there would be a lot of support. And I just liked the people I talked to. Which it sounds so simple when you say, but when you're going to go somewhere for 2 years, you're going to stop working, you're going to do all of that and actually go somewhere. It becomes really important to enjoy the people that you spend your time with. And so, I just really enjoyed the community aspect of what I got when I went to Darden and interacted with the people there. And that's very much remained true in my first year here.
How did you figure out when was the right time for you to come to Darden? Obviously, you had that window. Future scholars can matriculate anywhere from 2 years to 5 years into their careers. How did you figure out when you wanted to get started?
Well, I knew I was probably going to be on the longer end. It's no surprise that business school can be expensive. So in my mind, I was like, we got to put as much dollars in the bank to save before coming. So I kind of knew that beforehand that I was going to try and tend to be on the longer end. And then, you go to work and you're like, oh, okay, like this is, interesting. I got promoted after 2 years. So it kind of reinforced that I was going to be on the longer end. And then you get to a point where you kind of have to decide like, do I go back to school or do I try and get the next promotion or the next kind of responsibility? And it just felt like a really natural break of I'd been managing people for 2 years, which was great and absolutely loved that. Very happy I got to manage people before I came to business school. But I kind of realized that in order to get to the next step, it was going to be a while. And so might as well come back now when there's that natural break. I felt like I had achieved a lot. I had done a lot in my role, loved the people I was working with, but I kind of felt like I was at the end of that runway in some ways. And so I was going to have to pivot to something. And because I had this business school thing in my back pocket, I was like, okay, now is the right time to go. And so it just felt the most natural. It was I was sad to quit my job, but I'm definitely happy that I've come now. It's a great time in my life to do it. So it all worked out.
It's interesting to hear your story because you'd worked for a while, 4 years, you'd had the opportunity to manage. What do you think it would have been like to come, say, earlier in that journey, like 2 years into your career? Think about the Darden classroom and the case method experience.
Yeah, I generally think it would have been harder. I know people in my class who only did 2 years. And I think that they add really great contributions to the class, and really love having them as a part of the community. I think for me, I probably wouldn't have been able to contribute as much because the more you're ingrained in a company and in a process, the more you learn. And I don't know, like when I was 2 years into working, I didn't I didn't know, like, I thought I knew things, but I didn't actually know, like, what was going on. I sort of knew my role. I worked at a bank. I sort of knew my role in the bank, but didn't quite. I started to understand what people in the groups around mine, what they did, but I didn't fully understand where we fit in the machine. I hadn't really I had some leadership experience by being an analyst, but not a ton. And I just felt like there was more that I had to do to really understand what it was like to be working and to work with people of, different backgrounds and different perspectives, even manage those kinds of people. And so, that was something that I just don't think I would have gotten in 2 years. I mean, at least with my experience, I know I didn't get that in 2 years. And so the next 2 years, especially managing people, I don't know, I can't speak highly enough of that experience. You just learn so much about yourself, and who you are and how you show up to work and what your leadership style is and the things you like and the things you don't like, right? And it's very humbling in many ways to manage people, especially when all of them, in my case, were older than me. So, that was an experience that I think when I draw on for like interviews for recruiting or when I talk about experiences in the classroom, I feel like I really draw on those last 2 years where I was a manager, I was a part of decision making and that experience versus when I was, an entry level analyst just doing my relatively repetitive task, right? So I just think you learn so much more the further you go into, working and the more experience you have. But it's a delicate balance because that was 4 years. There's classmates of mine who have what seems like an entire career, 8, 10 years of experience. So there's a balance of how do you get the right experience for you? And how do you participate in the classroom in a way that's really authentic and genuine, but also striking that balance of where you want to go and what you want to do and all that. I know that's kind of vague, but it it you have to find the right point for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's great insight. I mean, I think there's a few things to think about, right? Where are you in your career? Do you feel like you're at a natural pause, as you mentioned? Um, Thinking about the classroom conversations, Darden's a unique learning environment and it's case method, it's discussion based. And so feeling like you're going to have experience to add to that conversation, I think is important. But you also mentioned the career process. When you talk to employers, having things to draw upon and to share with them, right? Maybe that doesn't necessarily always get talked about as much, but yes, you're going to be interviewing and engaging and you're going to need to talk about maybe relevant experiences or past experiences in those conversations.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the interview process. And it was something that I knew I wanted to do again. So I know that, my first role out of business school, most likely not going to manage people, but it's something I would like to get back to at some point. It just adds an element of the career that it just makes it, more rewarding in some ways. And you feel like you're not just doing a job, right? Like you actually have a place in the organization, you're making decisions, you're helping other people. Maybe there's some mentorship and some things like that. And so I knew I wanted to get back to that. Um, and so trying to find a way to actually get back to that, right? And so when you talk about those things in coffee chats, right, or you talk about them in an interview, really having that perspective of why you want to do it, what you've learned from it, and how it's grown you in your previous work is really important. And how you want to implement it. Recruiters do ask. They want to know times you failed, times that you implemented something. And there's a lot of things that are in some of those more softer skills or more management roles where it's like, okay, like I was a part of this decision and I was able to execute that because I had this team of people who, were behind me that I could really push forward, right? So, and you just add an element to that. I think you also add a huge element in the classroom. We take a lot of leadership courses, and how do you lead an organization? How do you communicate to other people? Those are major pillars of our core courses. And having managed people, when people have an idea in the classroom, you're immediately like, that would not work. Like, if you actually tried to tell this to other people, or, you tried to have that conversation, that would not work. And so you just get this very real life experience of, okay, I kind of know what my leadership style is. I'm still working on it, but I know that if I tried to implement X policy, it probably wouldn't go over well. And that's just an experience you only get by doing. And not having it coming into business school is completely okay. I don't know what the percentages are of people who've managed versus not, but you know, there you can participate in many ways at Darden. But that's been one that's been really special for me, is having had that experience and understanding how to apply that in the future.
Well, Pauline, obviously you thought about coming to Darden for a while. You kind of reached a point where you felt like, okay, it makes sense to get started now. What was the adjustment like to being at Darden as a brand new first year student?
Um, it it comes on all at once. To be quite honest with you, so I came a little bit early. I did Darden before Darden, which is it's an introductory kind of week long set of courses where it's particularly for folks who don't have quantitative backgrounds, but it also immerses you in the case learning environment and how to discuss and what professors are looking for. And so I voluntarily signed up for an extra week of class, which I think was probably one of the best decisions that I've made, because even only being 4 years out of school, I was like, okay, I need to get back into learning mode. And how do I do that? And for me, that was just getting jumping in and doing that. And so that was a really great part of the adjustment, because I think without that, when the first day of class hit, I probably would have been knocked on my butt. Like, oh, okay, we are moving full steam ahead. And so that was a really crucial part of my adjustment. I don't think it would have gone as well if I hadn't done that. Um, but it's like I said, it comes all at once. You start class, 2 weeks later, the recruiters are here. You're starting recruiting, and you're off to the races. The first quarter flew by. I remember we had exams, and I was a review coordinator for my section, and I remember trying to like coordinate all these materials and all these review sessions for the section, and it just, I mean, I couldn't believe it was 7 weeks. I was like, oh, wow, we have finals in a week. And so you don't realize throughout that time that you're constantly adjusting to what are the professors looking for in the classroom. And I have to go to these recruiting events and, all those different aspects. So I think as much as you can do in the summer before you come to Darden to kind of get your own things in order are really important. Like, even something such as moving, like making sure that you have enough time to do that and unpack and like get settled before you start class, making sure all your affairs are in order and all that stuff. I mean, that helps so much. And also for your career stuff, like, do you have an idea of what you want to do? Or you've ruled some things out so you don't have to go to every single career offering that they have in the first 3 weeks, right? So figuring some of that out also helped, because I was like, okay, I know I don't want to be a banker, so I'm not going to go to the investment banking 101. And so starting to rule some of those things out so I knew what I wanted to focus on, or at least a subset, so I could start making those decisions and not have a calendar that was completely jam-packed.
Yeah, you're right that you can have an idea of what you want to do. That's great, and there's resources for students prior to the start of school where you can begin to engage and refine that, and maybe have a pretty firm idea of what you'd like to do. But also knowing what you don't want to do is equally helpful, because there's so much coming at you at once on the career front, so many opportunities, so many different companies you can go learn about and hear about. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. I would actually say the biggest piece of advice is to find the things you don't want to do. Because it's very hard to find the thing you do want to do. And I put that in quotes, like, I mean, generally, you might be interested in consulting or you might be interested in general management, but to actually sit there and be like, this is the job title that I want, right? Like, that's a really hard thing to come up with. But you can sit there and say, okay, well, this is the type of work I like to do. And these are the things I really don't like doing. And this job has a lot of the things that I don't like doing. And so I'm not going to do that. And the Career Center does have a lot of resources. I used probably all of them over the summer of, they do a career foundations course. It's loosely a course, but it's, some different like self-assessments of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then what do you think you'd be good at? And I actually took all that and put it into AI and was like, okay, give me some job titles because this is telling me a whole career path that I still have no idea what they do, right? And so trying to find things that I knew I didn't like was a big thing because then I could come to school and be like, okay, these are the two or three things I know I don't need to worry about, don't need to put them on my calendar, don't even need to think about them. And you still have quite a bit of that subset that you are going to. And so finding things to eliminate from your calendar is very important. Yeah.
Well, Pauline, I'm curious how you obviously had spent some time sort of thinking about what you wanted to do, and it's interesting to hear that you used AI as part of that process. How have your career interests evolved during your time at Darden?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think when I came in here, I was like, oh, like I said, I worked at a bank. I was in operations, and I really liked it. Like I liked being in operations. I liked the exposure that I had to different parts of the bank. And I liked that my role especially was both client facing, but also had this internal data and systems aspect as well. And so trying to find roles that in essence encompass the best of those things. So I knew I didn't want to be sitting somewhere with no exposure to any stakeholders, like just kind of in a room doing my thing. I knew that was something I didn't want, but I also knew I didn't want to be in a sales type of role either, where I was constantly pitching different things and trying to get someone to buy something. Um, and so trying to find that middle ground of what that meant. And so, there are really big forces here at school of like consulting and investment banking. And so I started with the consulting side of things because I knew I didn't want to do banking. And I also then was exploring other opportunities that might not necessarily come to grounds, but are great opportunities for MBA students. And a lot of that is using the alumni network, using personal connections you might have had, and leveraging things like LinkedIn. And that's where AI in my prep was really helpful because I would say it was probably 50% accurate, but it at least gave me a structure to start with of like, here are 20 companies that are going to come to grounds, right? And maybe only 10 of them actually came to grounds, but I had a list that I could say, okay, keep my eye on these, try and find the opportunities. Here's what their grad internship program's name is, right? Like, is it the summer associate? Is it some other random name that these companies like to come up with, right? And so trying to find what those particular opportunities were just as a starting point, and then figure out what that actually meant when I was here. And it evolved. My career journey kind of evolved in many different ways because you have the actual companies that come to grounds, which is obviously a big push when you're here of like, okay, like we got to go to the big consulting, event, right? Or we've got to go to the MGM panel, right? And so you kind of get pulled in those ways. And then you start to have this epiphany of like, what are these jobs? What do I like about them? What do I not like about them? And they do say trust the process, which I thought was a bunch of BS, but it does work out. You got to kind of get through some of it before it finally works out. But I'll actually be I'll be doing some consulting in a financial crimes unit, doing fraud consulting this summer, which is the best of both worlds. I had thought I wanted to do something in operations, like I said. In my mind, that meant at a bank or at a credit card company or another financial institution. That's not something that necessarily recruits MBA interns. But the consulting companies have a role that's a bit niche that kind of plays into that, right? So it's hard to describe that evolution because sometimes what you think you want doesn't necessarily have a specific internship. And so trying to find opportunities that are really interesting that fit that, but might not have the name that you thought of when you first came in. That was most of my my evolution, was trying to find what that role title actually was.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And obviously, there's some twists and turns there. For some people, it's super linear, right? They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They move right through the process. They stick with that. Other people, there's some self-discovery along the way. There's trial and error, hypothesis testing. That's where the networking can be really helpful as you talk to people about what their day-to-day looks like. Um, Pauline, tell us a little bit about your section. What section were you?
I was section A, go Lions. I know this will be only a voice recording, but I do have lion earrings that I like to wear to recruiting events just to let everyone know that I'm in section A. Um, as you could tell, I have a lot of section pride. I don't know. I actually really loved the section construct here at Darden. You get to do all of your core courses with your section, which is really awesome. For us, our core courses were Q1 to Q3, so we spent many hours with our section, and I just felt like the discussions definitely got deeper as we moved through the quarters because you just knew the people in your class. What's been interesting though is now we're in Q4 in electives, and I'm not all with Section A people, and I'm like, oh, these are some really great things and really great ideas. Still meeting people in Q4, but I don't know. I really loved my section and having them as a backbone um, for 3 quarters. It was really nice to have that stability, if you will, of the same people every day.
Yeah, that is a nice thing. And it sounded like you also had a role within your section.
Yeah. So in sections, there are leadership. So you'll have your kind of section rep, who's in essence like the president of your section. And then there are various different roles. We've got social reps, we've got, you know, international student representation. And then my role was the exam review coordinator, which sounds very serious. It kind of was. But in essence, we all have exams at the end of our core courses, and all of the exams here, at least for when we've been here and in the past, are all open book, open note. And so in essence, what the exam review coordinator does is they create some kind of document or slide deck to create a great review for the students. And so you get to then run a session where people from the section can come in and ask their questions and get a great review of the material. And then also, whatever document you've created gets shared where then you can have that as a part of your notes. So it's a great way to get ready for exams in essence. And so we had 15 core courses, I think. And so creating and coordinating review sessions for those right before the exams was a big part of that. I loved it. I mean, creating study guides, if you will, is how I study. So it was a natural point of, okay, I'm probably going to do this anyway, just making it a bit more formal. And then getting to engage with other people in my sections, being like, hey, you're really good at finance. You're going to run our finance review, and pulling those people in to help the rest of the section. I know we talked about community beforehand. That's a great way that community shows up here at Darden, is you're really trying to bring the class along with you. And you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to run the review or to help compile the decks, but it's a great way to give back to the community of just bringing everyone together, giving them a great review, and hoping that everyone does really well on the exams, right? So I loved it. It's a highlight of my first year here. I got to know a lot of people doing it, and I've loved it.
And saw some other clubs, organizations, or activities that have been important to your time here at Darden.
Yeah, I mean, I will say in the first year you spend a lot of time recruiting, so the career clubs are a big part of your first year experience. My hot tip is to be a part of all of them. So even though I knew I didn't want to be a banker, I was a part of the finance club, and part of that is just you know someone like, I'll give an example. Someone like American Express is actually considered a tech company here. And so you want to be a part of the tech club to get that company's job role, right? And so there are all sorts of examples like that for different companies where you think, okay, maybe they're like a bank or their role is general management, but then they fall into the finance club or fall into the tech club. And so I was a part of all of them because I was like, I want every possible bonus point for trying to get a job. And so I joined all of them, and it was great. I mean, you meet people, you get to kind of understand what the different roles are. I learned and got to know about so many different roles through the different club chats and things like that. So I highly recommend if you come to Darden, be a part of all of them. That was a big part of the experience. And then I'm in other fun clubs, like we've got a wine and cheese club, which we call WAC for all of you finance people out there. But it's you go to a vineyard and you have some nice cheese and wine, and it's really nice, and you get to build community and do things outside the classroom. I'm part of the student admissions committee, so I helped put on Darden Days for our admitted students, which is a great way to get to know the incoming class and be a resource for them. And so you work really hard here, but you also have a lot of fun, and you get to meet a lot of people by doing the different clubs and being a part of the community in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, there's no shortage of ways to get involved. There's over 50 student organizations here, and not 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 to be overstated, but everybody who comes on the podcast has like a lot of other things happening in addition to going to class here. That's just the culture of the place, and there's all kinds of. I mean, we talked about the career clubs, but there's all kinds of other clubs. Like there's outdoors club, wine and cuisine club. There's a lot of different ways to be
Yeah, I
involved.
mean, I'm a part of the Adam Smith Society and the Business and Public Policy Club, which we had like a senior person from Trump's first administration come in and talk. Like you just get all these people who are tied to the UVA community in some way, whether it's, undergrad or for Darden specifically. And we just pull them back in. We're like, come back, come talk to us. And so I've been a part of, different clubs in that way that just, you get to go to a lunch and learn and get to hear someone who's accomplished a lot more than I have come talk and talk about how they did it, right? So it's a great part of the Darden experience.
Well, Pauline, here you are at the end of your first year. What are you looking forward to in the coming months?
Um, I am looking forward to the summer. I've got a really interesting internship opportunity that I'm excited for. Hoping that goes well. I'm excited to kind of step out of the Darden bubble, see how the work world has changed. I mean, when I left, the bank that I was at was not super AI forward, and I'm assuming I'm going to go into the work world and everyone's going to be using AI. So seeing how that's changed in the year that I've been out of that, and just spend some time with friends and family and just away from the work. We got a couple week break between when finals end and when my internship starts. So going home, seeing my grandma, seeing my parents, spending time with friends and family, and just getting a chance to relax and reset before the internship.
Where will you be based for your internship?
I'll be in New York, in the city. I will be, like I said, doing some fraud consulting. I'm excited. I'm trying to figure out what Broadway shows to go to, what sporting events I want to go to, and figuring out, what I want to do while I'm there. And there's plenty of restaurants to try, so I'm super excited. It'll be a very fun summer.
Well, that's great. Well, Pauline, any final words of advice for our listeners as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to an admitted student the other weekend at Darden Days, and I was trying to kind of quantify the value of Darden. And my undergrad had this saying of like, we're going to teach you how to read, write, and think. And I feel like Darden has kind of pushed that one step further of we're going to teach you how to read, write, and think and how to communicate, and how to bring the room along with you. And that's something that's really stuck with me, for some reason. And I like to share that because I think the community here is one of a kind. I mean, you're not going to get this anywhere else. And so making friends and learning and just being a part of the environment has been so special. And I'm really excited to kind of see what I continue to learn this summer and also when I come back for my second year and how that continues to evolve.
Pauline, thank you so much for your time today, and good luck with your internship this summer. New York City is a great place. Always wonderful to be there in the summer.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
And that was my conversation with Pauline Jaffe, a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2027. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's Darden, at virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.